Welcome to Evangelism On Fire podcast. My name is Mark Thomas, an evangelist, an ordained pastor, a teacher of the best-selling book of all time, your host, and most importantly, your evangelism coach. Every episode, I bring you an inspiring message to help you live the most exciting life God has created you to live by evangelizing your faith in Jesus with others. I believe in the power of the gospel and the potential of all Christians to live out the mission of the Great Commission. I believe the best way for Christians to grow is to go. It's time for a revolution in every Christian's life around the world so that everyone, everywhere around the world can hear the gospel of Jesus Christ from a friend or family member through one-on-one evangelism. Welcome, Evangelism on Fire Nation, to today's podcast episode. This is interview number 2 with Evan. Evan, how are you, man?
Dude, I'm good, and I'm grateful to be back.
Man, it's so good to have you for your second interview. Hey, man, I see you're wearing your favorite shirt again.
I am. It's one of my favorites.
I love it. I love it, man. I'm going to do a quick introduction of you. And, man, I want to talk about your amazing book, Evangelism Now, okay?
Thank you.
So this is who Evan Herrman is. He is a pastor, a speaker, and the CEO of Evangelism Now, a ministry dedicated to equipping believers to live out evangelism as a lifestyle. He is the author of Evangelism Now, and that's what we're going to talk about today, cultivating influence with a background in ministry, real estate, and personal development. Evan is passionate about helping individuals and churches grow in spirit, mind, and body. He is also a former podcast host with a global reach, a dedicated husband and father of 4, and a strong advocate for mentorship and discipleship. My brother, I want to talk about your amazing book, Evangelism On Now, or Evangelism Now. And this is what it looks like. I spoke briefly about it for our listeners, last week in your interview, your God Story interview number 1. And look, Evangelism on Fire Nation, if you haven't watched or listened to his interview last week, make sure you go back and listen or watch that. You don't want to miss that. Tell us about your book, man. Tell us about the journey of Evangelism Now.
Yeah, so, as I was talking about how academically reading and writing was extremely difficult for me growing up. When I went into college, I had a 7th grade reading level, okay? Imagine putting a 7th grader. Granted, I was more mature than a 7th grader, but academically, I wasn't in college. There was no special ed in college. However, I had a lot of great professors help me through my time there. And halfway through, God healed me of some of the challenges that I faced with reading and comprehension. My reading level went through the roof. And I still am not well at grammar or punctuation or spelling. Thank God for editors. And lots of editors on my book. But I will tell you this, it all got birthed out of a week while I was at college. I got 3 prophetic words in 1 week that I would be a writer from different people. And as an adult, I had a hard time sitting down to write. One day, I have a friend and a mentor of mine by the name of Nick Vujicic. And I was telling him about an idea for a book that I had. And he just simply said, well, if you write it, I'll forward it. And that was kind of like all I needed to decide to face my fear and my challenges of writing to write the book. And then 3 years later, it got published.
So how did you and Nick Vujicic become friends? He's like, I consider him a hero, one of my heroes of the faith, man.
Yeah.
So when I got a copy of your book and I saw it was forwarded by him, I'm like, how did this even happen, man?
So this is really funny. The first time I came acquainted with Nick, I was doing my business, scrolling through Facebook, and I saw his Oprah time, and I just felt like God say, you're going to be friends with this person. You're going to know him.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. So I For years, I tried to make that happen. And I won't give some of the secrets that I did in order to try to meet him, all of which were of no avail, but really funny. I'll talk to you off camera
Yeah.
about it. And then one day, I was interviewing a guy on a podcast, and he's like, "Oh yeah, Nick's a friend of mine, and he's going to be speaking at a rally that I'm hosting in Oklahoma City. You want to meet him?" And I said, "Sure." So I go, I talk with Nick a little bit, and we connected. And because of that, and our hearts for ministry are aligned in a lot of different areas. We've just stayed in contact, and he's poured into my life, and I consider him a friend and a mentor. I don't know if I don't know if he considers himself a mentor of mine, but I mean, we talk probably once a quarter, if he's free, and he's just given me a lot of wisdom in life.
Yeah, man, I'm gonna tell you what, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I love that he forwarded your book, man. Speaking of your book, man, let's go to page 5. All
Perfect.
right. And I'm gonna read something and you give us a backstory about that. Okay. On page 5, it says this. I heard him say, Evan, this is exactly how I feel when any of my children live a life without ever knowing my love. Tell us
Ooh,
about that, man.
tearjerker. So the backstory, my wife is pregnant with our first child, and we go into the hospital around 21 and a half weeks because my wife is feeling stomach pain. Basically, my daughter was already deceased, and my wife was going into labor. And so we found out a day prior that we'd be having a stillborn child. A lot of crying, a lot of prayer, but we finally came to grips with our daughter being gone. When my daughter was born, she was born already deceased. We got to keep her body for about 7 hours, Mark. And, I prepared myself. I knew she was gone, but what I wasn't expecting, Mark, was when I was holding my daughter and the nurse walks in at 7 at night and says, "Mr. Herrman, it's now time for us to take her body."
Mm.
And I had to hand her over, never to see her or to hold her again. The pain, the desperation, the anxiety, as if life itself was being sucked right out of me. It felt as if, have you ever been held underwater as a kid swimming and you become desperate and frantic for oxygen? It felt like that, but a million times worse.
Mm.
And so fast forward to 9 o'clock at night, I'm laying on the hospital couch. My wife's asleep. And I say, "God, I know you're a good God no matter what. I don't believe you needed another little angel in heaven. I don't believe you took her from us. I believe that the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and that this was a part of his plan and not yours. But saying all that, God, I need to see your love. I need to know your love in all this because I don't." And he gave me a picture, a flashback of the moment I handed her body over. And those feelings of pain and desperation and anxiety flooded my heart and mind again. And I heard him say, "This is how I feel anytime any of my children live a life without ever knowing my love."
Wow.
And it wrecked me. It wrecked me because I realized part of the hurt and the pain would not getting to see her grow up, her life, any of that, but that she wouldn't get to know my love and affection and care for her. And I could relate to God in a way that I've never been able to relate to. There's a lot more dialogue that God and I had after that. But what ended up happening was I'd already led people to the Lord. I already spoke about Christianity, but that was like my linchpin. That was like the grenade going off when I made a promise not to God, but to Satan. I said, I'm going to use this story in this moment to change the lives of people. What you meant for evil, God is going to bring healing and restoration and salvation out of. And I made that promise directly to Satan himself. I will stand at the gates of hell and I will redirect traffic.
Yeah. That's interesting. You made a promise to Satan. You made that promise to him.
Yep.
That the gates of hell shall not prevail. Man, when I read that in your book, bro, I'm all about living an active lifestyle of evangelism, but that gripped me. If we could know God's heart like that for every individual that does not come to Jesus as their Savior, that they'll be eternally separated from God, man, I really want to believe that every Christian would be all about living an active lifestyle of evangelism. Man, that's how your book gripped me, man. The sad statistic is, I used to say, Evan, 95% of Christians will never share the gospel leading anyone to Jesus. But you know what? The correct metric is 97% of Christians will
Correct.
never, you know, and that's why, man, your book, man, I mentioned in the first interview, your God story interview, man, I've been reading evangelism books for 23 years. I'm actively studying the art of evangelism to be able to present the gospel more clearly and concisely with others. Your book, man, has had a dramatic impact. One of my favorite books in 23 years. Let me ask you, you shared a little bit why evangelism is so important to you, but I want to ask you more in depth. Why is evangelism so important to you, man?
A variety of areas, but one, having that call of God on my life from a young age, where he called me. I wanted to be a firefighter. I wanted to be a police officer. And there was an altar call for kids who wanted to be in ministry growing up. And, that wasn't me. And then all of a sudden, through that prayer, that call ignited my heart. And I've never been able to shake it.
Mm.
I've been through a lot of hurt, Mark.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of friends pass away young, tremendously, and I believe I talk about that a little bit in the book.
Yeah.
With my daughter, though, that was where rage took over, where I was so angry, not at God, but at Satan.
Come on.
And so a beast in me to share his love was awakened. And I believe, looking back, that was probably a moment, and the most painful moment of my life, where a mantle of evangelism was put on me.
Yeah, as you're speaking, Evan, I want the beast of everyone listening right now. I want the beast of evangelism to be ignited in every Christian's life. And man, I really believe that your book, Evangelism Now, is going to be fuel to activate the beast in every Christ follower's life, to get out there and share the best news, the good news, the Evangelion, the gospel. What do you want? Here's a question, man. You're getting me fired up, brother. What do you want the church to know about evangelism?
I want the church to know that evangelism is not dependent on the minister. It is dependent on us as lay people.
Yeah.
Because you look at the explosion of the church in Acts, and you look at that, it was because people were inviting people over to their houses.
Yeah.
We live in such a separated society. We need to invite people into our lives and minister to them. Saved, unsaved. That's how the church exploded. Yes, miracles, signs, and wonders were happening, but the church exploded because of relationships that were established and built. Because you are more likely to lead someone to Christ if they know, like, and trust you than a minister speaking from a pulpit.
Yeah. Say that one more time, man. Say that one more time.
You are more likely to reach someone to Christ who knows, likes, and trusts you than a minister from a pulpit.
Yes. Yes.
And so I want the church to wake up and no, my job as a Christian is to go evangelize. Oh, but Evan, I don't speak from stage. They didn't ask you to speak from stage. God's not asking you to speak from stage. But he has given you spiritual gifts that if you don't know what they are, it is your duty to find out what they are.
Come on.
And then when you find out what your duty and your spiritual gifts are, then you look at your personality. Okay, well, this is my personality. These are my gifts. Okay, who's in my sphere of influence? Then those are the people you go after. You go after the people of work. Look, back in 2008, I was one of the first customers at a Thai restaurant across from my campus at Oral Roberts University. I still have a relationship with that guy who started it because I frequented there and I talked about Jesus to him consistently. I go to Walmart multiple times a week. I see Charles. I see Chase. I see Anita. I see Jeff. I see Victoria. These people who work there. I create relationships with people everywhere I go, and I build on it after year after year after year. And here's what I've realized. I have a high capacity for relationship. Not everyone does.
Mm-hmm.
But some of us are, dare I say, butthurt because we are afraid that people don't like us because they're not inviting us. Well, maybe that's because you're the one who's supposed to do the inviting. So as Christians, we are to what? Go and preach the gospel. And so there are multiple modes of evangelism. There's invitational, there's digital, and I'll have to go through my book because I didn't memorize them all. But there's multiple modes of evangelism that you have a gift or a bent towards. And once you find that, use it.
Yeah.
That's my tangent.
Hey, man, that's a good word right there. And look, I know you have, we have about 10 more minutes, but I want to ask you, some people are listening and they've never evangelized before one-on-one with anyone. They've been thinking about it. They know that Jesus has called them to do that, right? What's a good
Right.
starting point for someone if it's their first time evangelizing, sharing the gospel with someone?
Absolutely. So to segue your question in what I was last saying, because I want to make sure I'm going to do all this. I'm going to answer that at the end of this.
Okay.
So there's different styles of evangelism. There's relational, there's acts of service, there's intellectual, there's street ministry, there's digital, there's testimonial, and there's invitational. I think I might have already said invitational. One of the best ways that you can start evangelism is figure out what your testimony is and then learn how to share it. Mark, I will give you a link. You can use it however you want. You can R&D it, which is rip off and duplicate. I don't care.
I specialize in that, man.
I got a training on how to create your own testimony and how to present it. And then the other thing is just invite people. Like maybe you're not there yet for creating your own testimony. Just go invite someone to church. Go get your church, business cards. Like, hey, come to church with me. Hey, come to church with me. That is the simplest step.
Yeah.
But the first, even before that, you have to get over the fear. You have to get over the fear of rejection. And this is how you get over the fear of rejection, by doing it.
Yeah.
I cared a lot of what people thought of me when I started. Now I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. That's so good. So now, well, how do you deal with fear? I mean, you're used to overcoming the fear, but for someone who's just starting out, what would you say to them about dealing with that fear that they have?
Yeah.
You know what? I'll say this, man. I tell people a lot of times, you know what? Your nervousness about sharing the gospel with people creates an excitement, and you confuse the excitement for the fear. I think one of the reasons that God created the Great Commission is because it's the most exciting thing that we could do. So I think, man, this is just my thoughts, that some people think they're fearful when really it's excitement that they're going to take part in something supernatural. You know what I mean?
So fear and excitement often have the same symptoms.
Yeah.
Like legitimately, that's something I've learned working through anxiety. And so my advice to overcome fear, one, God has not given you a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. So one, stand on scripture. Two, there is no worse feeling in the world than feeling led to go talk to someone and not obeying God. Do that.
Yeah.
Go talk to them. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you're going to be. You might mess up, but you know what? They're not going to remember you 2 hours from now.
It's true.
If you mess up, they're not going to be thinking about you. It's only the deceiver who's going to be trying to put thoughts in your life. And there's this person in the book that I talk about, Mark. And since we're talking about evangelism, she's one of the first evangelists, like legitimately, on her own accord, was the woman at the well.
Yeah.
She met Jesus, realized that this was the Messiah. And the reason why she was alone at the well in noonday is because she was ostracized from the community. You wouldn't go in the heat of the day to get water from the well. You'd go in the morning when all the other women went. But because she was ostracized, because she was living such a sexualized lifestyle and she was shunned, she went noonday. Well, what had happened is she had an encounter with Jesus, believed him to be the Messiah, and then went straight to the community and said, hey, I know y'all know my sins. Here's this man who's told me all my sins. I think he's the Messiah. Come with me. Come look at him. Come talk to him. And immediately she became a witness in an evangelism for Jesus. She had no training. She used her own sin
Mm.
to point people towards Jesus. And sometimes we can even do that.
Yeah.
So if
That's so
she
good.
can do it, we can do it.
Yeah, that's one thing I love about your book, man. You speak about the woman at the well. And you know what? A lot of people, they think that they need to be perfect or that their life isn't at the point where it should be in their walk with Christ, that they're not ready to allow God to use them to share the gospel message. But man, it's not about being perfect people. It's about allowing God to use us in our brokenness, like that woman at the well.
Yeah.
That the most broken person in that community went into the community, said, "This is the Messiah. You've got to come and check him out." So God can use us in our brokenness, man, just like he did the woman at the well. That's
Yeah.
one thing that you speak about in your book that I absolutely love and encourages me. Man, we have about 6 more minutes before this podcast episode is completed. Thank you again for making time to come on here. I want you to share with us why people should buy your book, Evangelism Now, and how can they buy your book, Evangelism Now. And I want to challenge our listeners, don't buy a copy for yourself and be selfish. Make sure you get multiple copies and pass it to your friends and encourage them to evangelize the gospel message. I call it the boom. Encourage them to spread the boom. So why should people buy your book, Evan?
If you are a follower of Jesus, it is the mandate on your life to share his truth to others around you. There's going to be a moment when you get to heaven, and when hopefully to me, he says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." But I don't want to be the servant that stuck his coin in the sand. I want to be the one who invested into other people, who led other people to Christ. So for you, 97% of Christians don't lead people to Christ. That is a big number.
Mm.
And I want to encourage you, don't be the 97. Be the top 3%. Be the top 4%. 3%. Yeah. You need to buy the book because this will equip you and teach you and help you understand the very basics of evangelism. It'll match your personality and skill set to a specific gift of evangelism. It'll help you overcome fear. There's lies that you're telling yourself. There's lies that the world has told you. It will help you overcome the lies and disbeliefs of why we should do evangelism. Because our culture says, don't do evangelism. It's wrong. It's offensive. Well, guess what? The cross is offensive. And I got to tell you, you can preach the truth and love. You can get it on Amazon, and you can get it pretty much wherever books are sold. What I ask is just don't return it. If you don't want to read it, just go give it to someone else. Because if you return it, then I actually have to pay for it. And so I have multiple friends. Like I had like 100+ books, sold, and then I got returned books. I'm like, okay, well then I had to pay for those returned books. So don't do that to me. Just go give it to someone else.
Yeah. That's good. So Evangelism on Fire Nation. Oh, go ahead, Evan.
I still got a few minutes, but I got a question for you, Mark.
Yeah.
What was your favorite part of the book?
My favorite part of the book is I love the evangelism styles, that you mentioned. Because here's the thing, man. People are always comparing themselves. Like, I can't evangelize like this person, or I can't evangelize like that person. Well, when you know that you can evangelize with the style, the personality style that God has given to you, that's empowering. And if you just specialize in that one style of evangelism, man, you're unstoppable, man. And I think if people stop comparing themselves to another person, like, oh, I can't evangelize like Evan, or I can't evangelize like Mark. If they can evangelize like God made them to by knowing their own evangelism style, man, they're unstoppable, and they have confidence in that, and they'll find boldness in that, and they'll begin to share the gospel message in that personality style that God has created them to. So that's my favorite part of the book, man.
As you're sharing that, I'm reminded of a story, and I don't remember who the teacher is or who this other evangelist is, but there was a Bible teacher to Billy Graham and another guy who both became world-renowned evangelists. And she was a Sunday school teacher.
Mm.
think about the impact and her legacy through other people. I mean, she didn't go lead millions and millions of people to the Lord.
Yeah.
She led those that did. And so whatever God has given you, we are called to be stewards of.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what Mark is saying. You have a gift, and I want you to be a steward of that gift.
That's it, brother. You said it. Hey, Evangelism on Fire Nation. Evan, thank you for being on our show again this week. I appreciate you, brother.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. Evangelism on Fire Nation. Go buy Evan's book. Okay?
Yes.
Buy multiple copies to give out to your friends. Boom. That's it right there. Evangelism Now. If you're not going to read it, don't return it. Do not do that to Evan. Yeah. Just give it to someone else. But look, I want to encourage you. Make sure you read that book.
Also, depending on where you search for online to buy it, you might also have to type in my name with the book, because there's a lot of evangelism books that come up when you type in Evangelism Now. And depending on how that algorithm is, sometimes it doesn't rank. And so you might also have to type in, my name.
Yeah. Awesome. Evan, thanks again for being on Evangelism on Fire podcast. Evangelism on Fire Nation. We'll see you here again next Tuesday for our next episode. God bless you and have the best week of your life. Thanks so much for your time with me today. It's been an amazing time, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and it inspired you on your journey of sharing your faith in Jesus with others. Make sure to check out today's podcast show notes for a description of today's show along with other super important details. And also make sure to share this with a friend and subscribe over on Apple Podcasts as well. I really appreciate your feedback, Evangelism on Fire Nation, so share a review on Apple and let me know what part of this episode resonated with you the most. And hey, if no one has told you lately, God loves you, I love you, you matter, and you have divine purpose. Now it's time to go out there and share the gospel message with others. Make sure to join me for our next episode.